Well, welcome everybody. I'm Chris Wahl. It's good to see many familiar and new faces at the same time. As Stephen brought up, this has been quite a journey from a Rubrik perspective. I think this is the 5th time we've been at a field day. The first time we've ever hosted one on our own campus. So we recently moved into this building, and as you've taken photos of the flowers and whatnot, I think it's pretty groovy. I like coming out here. This is my 7th year interacting in some way, shape, or form with Field Day. So I did, I think, 11 as a delegate, and then now 4 as a sponsor. So I understand what you're going through, and I understand the presenters prior and after, like what they're going through. It's a weird perspective. Really quick, before I intro the Rubrik stuff, I just wanted to share, like, who saw this moment when the spaceman was rocked out there in a Tesla? Like, awesome. Very, like, emotional moment for me because I own a very, very old copy of the original Hitchhiker's Guide signed by Douglas Adams. You know, may he rest in peace. Excellent writer. So I actually was clutching that, like, oh, this is so cool. I felt, you know, I literally was crying. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm very excited about this. For the first time, we're seeing, like, the advancement of science and technology. And we did a keynote at the sales kickoff at Rubrik, and I kind of related that to how I feel when I'm at this company and why I feel that joy kind of every day. So just a little vulnerable moment there. I know that we're supposed to start with the problem, so let me just move the mouse out of there. There we go. So I'll start with the problem because Tim seems to think that that's important. So I love to pull your tweets and whatnot. Like, I read this stuff, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to get to the problem. The problem is that this is like $10 here in San Francisco for avocado toast. So the next generation Rubrik is no, I'm just kidding. That's not the problem. Hopefully I don't tank anything out there. For those that are new, I just wanted to include a very quick the problem because it's a little obligatory. I don't have any Gartner Magic Quadrant here. You're good. It's essentially just the fact that when I joined in 2015, it was the admission that who's like a big fan of their backup software and whatnot, and really wanted to like, you are? What? No, you wrote your own, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
I was going to say,
yeah. So I mean, I was
trying to convoke, Chris.
I don't make fun of anybody. I'm just saying, as an end user, I was having to deal with all this, and this was my world. Although there was like dedupe added and disk for backup, but it's largely this kind of black morass of misery. Right? That's kind of what backup was. And I actually pushed back, and they're like, hey, come join for Rubrik. I'm like, what do you do? Backup. I'm like, nope, not going to do that. But then I saw that they were looking at, let's take all these bits and bytes that you need from an architecture perspective to build data protection, and let's distill those as services. Let's write our own file system. Let's actually deploy the software in a very cloud-focused model, whether or not you want to use physical, virtual, cloud as your implementation vehicle, right? So it was kind of cool from that perspective, but I also got sold on the long-term vision that it wasn't just about making a better backup mousetrap. It was how can we move the needle entirely on data protection and actually start including cloud as a first-class citizen rather than just a dumping repository where files sit and then you have to manage them, right? So that's what I was thinking. Also, everything scales out like it should. There's no single points of failure. There's no control heads that you have to deal with. There's no forklifts. So I was like, okay, I can bite in on this. I'm down with it. The experience for the customer, just in case you've like never heard of us before, or you didn't read Justin's like prep post, which man, I really wanted to get you Alec McBeal season 1 DVDs to complement the season 2 that I got you a couple years ago, but it was out of stock. I don't know why. Like, who's buying that? I don't know, but it wasn't available.
Clearly.
Yeah, I was very very angry at Amazon Prime. But essentially, it doesn't matter how you deploy the Rubrik software. It could be on an appliance, we call it the brick. It could be virtual using our Edge or Air appliance, or it could be totally in the cloud using Rubrik Cloud Cluster. You deploy it, it inventories everything by talking to the centralized management, such as vCenter, or the APIs, or actually physically using our connector service to inventory everything that's out there. All you as a customer have to do is actually build out the SLAs that map to your business requirements, the RPO, RTO, availability, replication, long-term retention around the data. And then you assign those to the objects that you're looking to protect. And Rubrik does all the rest. It schedules all of the actual tasks that it takes to ingest all that data. It parallelizes it across the entire cluster, so there's no kind of choke point from a network perspective. Every node has 10 gig or whatever it's using in the cloud. And that's all done kind of intelligently based on the SLA versus building backup jobs, which are not so fun. The great thing, though, is the recovery, because it's like backup speeds are irrelevant. If you can't restore, you should be testing this stuff. I was recently answering some questions like, why is backup testing and restoration testing important? I'm like, why is this a question? Shouldn't you realize there's value in that? But if you had an issue, something like ransomware or corruption or junior admin deletes something, no problem. You have instant recovery. which puts it back in place with all the permissions, the exact same hierarchy, name, all that kind of jazz for you, and you're back to square one. And that's typically near zero RTO, maybe a few minutes or something like that if it's something monstrously large. But the way that we've designed the system is it's built to put all of the data back into production. Question?
Hyper-V VMs that are running as domain controllers, is that supported as well?
Well, you always have to follow the vendor's recommendation. So like if you had no domain controllers left over and you put them back in play, that's an option. Or it could be that you're putting one in play using a live mount and then using the recycle bin or the tombstone to actually build out whatever it is, or put it in directory services restore mode.
But you could back up a VM running as a DC.
Yeah, we have a lot of customers doing that. Absolutely. Cool. And then cloud nativity, being cloud native, I think is important. Since 1.0 of the product, it has talked to S3, and we've expanded the use case beyond that point. We don't want it to just be like, there will be dragons and things go in the cloud, and you then have to deal with that. We allow you to archive and do some other creative things that we demoed at Cloud Field Day 2, with being able to instantiate from backup and things like that in the cloud. We're going to go into that deeper today, but they exist. The other thing that really drew me to the company was everything we do as a product is calling an API that is open and documented. So when you work with the interface and you actually click on things within the Rubrik interface, it's calling an API in the back end. You can open developer mode, hit F12 on Chrome as an example. You'll see every single call. So you can see exactly what we're sending from a payload perspective. You can use it. We use it. You can integrate with third-party software and use it that way, kind of however you want. We don't limit you. And the question that comes up is, as I show something, people will ask, can I automate that? The answer is always yes, because there's always an open API for it. I wanted to add this because I know we have a cloud and encryption expert here. So I get a lot of questions around where is it, what's encrypted, what's actually, secure with the system. Everything on ingest, everything on replication, everything on archive, everything that's stored, all encrypted, in flight, at rest, using your keys. Even inter-node communication between the distributed cluster is also fully encrypted, right? So you get lots and lots of layers as far as making sure that all the data in flight and at rest are encrypted based on your security requirements. Cool? That tends to come up, so I wanted to kind of cough and nail that a little bit and highlight Ken Hui's amazing set of blog posts. I think it's 30,000 words of some sort. It's like an ebook, basically. Probably do something like that. What's that?
He has all the words.
Yeah, and I like it because it's not really like Rubrik per se. The focus on it is how are we dealing with encryption for public cloud, and it talks about the major three public clouds, Amazon, Azure, and GCP. So I got the parts here with a tiny URL, so you can go check those out. Those are on his blog. Highly promote that, and he'll be talking a little bit later. So the end goal, let me just build this out, is that today you can have Rubrik on-prem, you can have us as a cloud cluster, or use our features and technologies in all three major clouds. And the way that you set up the topology is largely irrelevant, right? The Rubrik software is really looking at things from an SLA perspective and from what access it has into your cloud environment, what you want to do, and then makes that reality happen for you. Cool so far? And we'll go a lot deeper in this stuff. I'm just, I'm the warm-up act to get everyone excited here. Before I move on, good so far? All right?
Wow, you actually did read my tweet.
I did.
That was great.
Tried. Hey, it hurts me.
Context.
I obviously went enough to go take a screenshot and put it into the deck. So at any rate. So I wanted to cover some kind of new things for those that are maybe been following our journey a little bit longer. First off, this is kind of for both. The last time we were on a field day was Cloud Field Day 2, which was late July of last year. So it's been a little bit. Since then, we were just covering our 4.0 release. We've since then released 4.1. But this is just meant to kind of show you the company's been going gangbusters. I joined right around here when 1.0 was released, and you can see a cadence of roughly every quarter-ish. There's a new either dot release or major release that comes out with a lot of juice behind it, and we're over 900 people. So we have a pretty big global footprint, considering I started here as number 48. So that's intense. That doesn't normally happen like this. It's been a lot of fun, and I think it's because we genuinely solve some pain points for customers. In fact, I brought up a few testimonials from folks that are like, what are they saying? What are they publicly willing to state their reputation on? And a lot of it is like, I love it. The time savings, the fact that I don't have to deal with this thing, the fact that I can actually start focusing on delivering value above and beyond fixing broken backup jobs, I thought was cool. There was a lot here, I even pointed out hey, he had a disconnect cognitively, this is what he expected, it wasn't reality. Engage with support, got him totally on board. Right? So I think that's positive feedback. I like hearing that support is helping out with people. We made an acquisition which kind of blew my mind because I've never bought a company before. Like, I personally didn't buy it. I don't have that kind of money. But we bought Datos.io, which is an awesome company focused on kind of the NoSQL space to do backups. And so the way that I presented this is kind of, Rubrik's been laser focused on what we call data center applications. That's your major hypervisors from VMware and Nutanix and Microsoft, as well as a lot of physical workloads. We just recently announced AIX as an example. So there's a lot to unpack here. And then Datos.io has been really laser focused on things like Cassandra and other NoSQL type databases to make sure that when we combine these two, we feel like we can really attack what's in the data center today, as well as what people are moving into with Mongo and Cassandra and those other kind of NoSQL type databases. Because these tend to be something that you play with and all of a sudden it goes in production. And then it's like, well, how do we protect this? Because I can't just talk to one node. I need a quorum from multiple nodes. So I think that's pretty awesome. And you'll see this continue to evolve as we get kind of Rubrik's cloud data management flagship product merged into what Rubrik Datos.io, which is what we're calling them now, is doing. But the results are kind of the same. Especially when we look at the semantic deduplication that they've patented. I think they have 20 or 22 some odd patents specifically around how they talk to distributed databases and how they protect that. I'll point you out, there's a solutions overview that you can go like super deep on that. I wanted to kind of wait until maybe the next field day to go really deep into it and show demos and whatnot as we evolve that integration. But I'll say this is pretty cool because they go into Coder, kind of what's going on under the covers within the engine and all the patents that go with that. As well as we're continuing to go to market with them as they exist today. So example, we're doing a backup and recovery webinar around Cassandra on the 10th of April that you can log into. So it's not like, I made a not so funny joke earlier, but I was like, we're not worried just buying them and then just like retiring it. We're working, they're actually like right over there in this building working as a unit with our team. So awesome, throw up the horns for those guys. And then Polaris Saas got announced yesterday. I was very adamant that happened so that we could talk about it today. It was like, should we do it? Whatever. Like, no, we got to do it on Cloud Field Day because this is important. So folks at least heard Polaris a little bit. A couple head nods, a couple hand raise. All right. This is a complementary kind of new product from Rubrik, right? So this is a completely new adventure that we're taking, kind of our second act, if you will. I talked a lot about Rubrik Cloud Data Management on-prem, and that's working great today when you have all these applications in the data center. And potentially you're like, oh, cloud, that looks kind of cool. I'm going to follow that trend. I'm going to put some stuff in those cloudy environments. And you can protect those with Rubrik, as well as Rubrik Datos.io. But now it's kind of like, okay, there's a lot of fragmentation going on. There's a lot of potential different control points that I have to deal with. We want to give everyone that seamless experience and build that, if you will, unified system of record so that regardless of where the data lives, I know where it is, I can see the versions of it, I understand all the metadata around it. And so the idea is, let's put literally a unified system of record that's hosted as a SaaS platform that talks southbound to the APIs that are running on the Rubrik CDM instances. So regardless of what cloud you're consuming or what data center that you're running in or colo or whatnot or partner, we can feed into all the metadata that's being generated from these different instances. We know what the files are, the applications, what's being protected, how often, what they're doing. That's all kind of the metadata that I'm talking about here. We can then absorb that via the API into this Polaris SaaS platform, where you get your own login as a customer and you can kind of see all your instances and control and command them. And then we float up APIs northbound from there, where you can build what's called a data management application. And the data management application can tap into that unified system of record to solve all these use cases. And I try to focus on the use cases rather than like specific products or technologies. Control and policy management is kind of a no-brainer. The fact that you can see all your Rubrik instances, and not only that, but report on it, analyze the data, potentially see what your compliance and regulatory needs are being met or not, that kind of jazz. I'll go into that a lot deeper towards the end because I want to make sure everyone else on my team got a lot of time to go into some other cool things that we're doing. So the one thing I'll add towards the end, though, is these two products do mutually reinforce one another. When you deploy Rubrik Cloud Data Management, that builds the unified system of record across all of your implementations. Typically, it's a couple data centers and maybe some cloud thrown in there. We can then feed that information into Polaris, and that's where you can kind of globally query all that metadata. And then you can take action on that, and that allows you to control and get visibility as well as control back into your RCDM instances. So it's kind of a feedback loop there. And I like feedback loops. I don't want one-way conversations. So in summary, I think having simplicity and scalability when it comes to all your data management needs is important, right? For all your applications, all your data. Pardon the swirly thing. I know it's kind of fun. This is all built for cloud from a generation perspective. Nothing is a bolt-on. Everything is native from a code perspective. And really, the reason I think it's been so sticky across the enterprise, commercial, and MSPs and whatnot is you're going to save typically a lot of money. If you look at tape archive and kind of the other ways that people do data protection, kind of build your own, build out the storage, put it all together, or even buy kind of a purpose-built backup appliance and then tie some software to it, this is typically north of 20 to 30%, if not more, cheaper. And the ROI is quite easy to realize. So it works better and it's cheaper. Tends to be good. From an agenda perspective, and then I'll pause for any final questions. This is what we're going to cover. We're going to start with Cloud Out with Andrew. Then we're going to go to AWS Native Protection that Ken is going to cover. Rebecca and Marcus are going to talk about our integration with MSPs and cloud providers and things like that. And then I will go deeper into Polaris. So that's our 2-hour time. All good? Questions? If I can put that up as a question thing? Yes.
Just 2 questions. Are you doing anything in the way of backup of containers? And a lot of companies are using things like GitHub and different repositories for doing work in. Do you do anything for that sort of thing that I might want to back up as well?
That does come up, and I was actually talking to Ken about that a little bit earlier offline, and we both kind of agree that standard is still kind of coming out. We're still figuring out exactly how to put your arms around that, and I know during his presentation we kind of talk about that in a bit, but to be succinct, no, we don't talk to containers directly at this point, although it's certainly something that we're...
Things like GitHub or development environments where developers are checking in and checking out.
That was an interesting one because I needed that myself. I run quite a few open source projects, and I was worried about potentially something happening or getting corruption. And so you could easily just set up a mirrored repository somewhere that you then back that up from a file set perspective, and that would version all the artifacts within the repository, and that would work without having to tie directly into GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever it is directly integrate with them. So that's what I've been doing, and I found when I looked for solutions that were kind of open source third party, that's what a lot of other folks doing. But if anyone has a better way, I'm open to that too.
Right, okay.